The scissors caught the fluorescent light just before they cut. One motion, one snip. A clump of black coils hit the floor like a guillotine blade. Nia Robinson didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just memorized the face of the woman who just made the biggest mistake of her professional life. Mrs. Evelyn Granger had no idea who she was dealing with. Jefferson High School, March 14th, 7:47 a.m. The morning started like any other. Lockers slammed. Sneakers squeaked on wax floors. The smell of cafeteria breakfast hung in the air, that institutional mix of powdered eggs and industrial cleaner. Nia walked through those halls with her head high, her natural hair styled in a crown of perfect coils that had taken her over an hour to shape that morning. Each twist was deliberate. Each curl was a statement. This wasn't just hair. This was identity. This was heritage. This was power. Third period English. Room 214. Mrs. Granger's domain. Nia took her usual seat, third row, center position. Strategic. Close enough to appear engaged, far enough to stay off the radar. She'd learned this calculus months ago. Stay visible but not too visible. Participate but don't dominate. Exist in the space that teachers forget to scrutinize. But today, Mrs. Granger's eyes locked onto her the moment she walked in. The classroom buzzed with pre-lesson energy. Marcus was showing off his new sneakers. Brittany was frantically copying someone's homework. The usual chaos of teenagers forced into proximity. Then Mrs. Granger's voice cut through it all like a frozen blade. "Miss Robinson." The room went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned. "Your hair is a violation of school policy." Nia's hands moved to her hair instinctively, then dropped. Her heart rate didn't spike. Her voice stayed level. "Mrs. Granger, my hair follows all school guidelines. It's neat, it's clean, and it's unsanitary and disruptive." Mrs. Granger's lip curled. "You people always push boundaries. Always testing how much you can get away with." "You people." Those two words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. The other students shifted uncomfortably. Nia felt 27 pairs of eyes on her. Some are sympathetic. Some are curious. Some were relieved it wasn't them. She'd worn this exact style for 4 months. 4 months without a single comment. So what changed today? What invisible line had she supposedly crossed? Or was this about something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with hair, and everything to do with control, power, and who gets to decide what's acceptable? Nia's voice stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. "There's nothing in the student handbook that prohibits natural hair." I checked. She had checked 3 times. After the incident last semester when Mrs. Granger made that comment about professional appearance during Nia's presentation. Nia had gone home that day and read every single line of Jefferson High's dress code. Hair must be neat and clean. No extremidades. No inappropriate. Her hair violated none of these rules. Mrs. Granger's face flushed. "Don't talk back to me. I've been teaching for 23 years, and I know disruption when I see it." She moved around her desk, heels clicking against linoleum. Each step is deliberate. Each step closing distance. You will go to the bathroom and do something about that hair, or you will sit in detention for the rest of the week. The thread hung between them. Nia calculated. She could comply and lose herself. She could refuse and escalate. Both paths led to consequences. But only one path let her keep her dignity. "I'm not changing my hair, Mrs. Granger. It doesn't violate any rules." That's when Mrs. Granger's hand shot out. Her fingers tangled in Nia's hair, gripping a section near her temple. The pain was immediate and shocking, not just physical but violating. Gasps erupted around the room. Marcus half stood from his seat. Brittany's hand flew to her mouth. And Nia? Nia went absolutely still. Every muscle locked. Every sense sharpened. She would remember this. Every detail. Every witness. Every second. "Sit your nappy-headed self down before I handle it for you," Mrs. Granger hissed, yanking Nia from her chair. The word nappy landed like a slur, which is exactly what it was meant to be. Nia stumbled forward, her scalp burning. Her eyes watered from pain, not tears. There's a difference. Mrs. Granger dragged her toward the front of the classroom like she was a disobedient child, not a 16-year-old honors student. If you're watching this and your heart is already racing, subscribe now, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will change everything. You need to see how this ends. The scissors came from Mrs. Granger's desk drawer. The same scissors she used to cut construction paper for bulletin boards. The same scissors that now hovered near Nia's face. You want to be defiant. Let's see how defiant you feel when you look presentable. The blades opened. Nia's eyes tracked them. Her breathing stayed controlled. And at that moment, she made a decision. She wouldn't fight. She wouldn't give Mrs. Granger the satisfaction of a reaction. She would be a witness to her own assault. She would document this in her memory with perfect clarity, because she knew something Mrs. Granger didn't. She knew exactly who would hear about this. But would staying silent in this moment be strength or submission? And what was about to be taken from her that could never be given back? Snip. The sound echoed in the silent classroom like a bone breaking. A thick lock of Nia's hair fell to the floor, coils spreading across pale linoleum like spilled ink. Snip. Another section. Mrs. Granger's hand moved with terrifying efficiency, her face twisted in something that looked less like discipline and more like satisfaction. Snip. Snip. Nia's hair, the hair she'd grown for 3 years, the hair her grandmother had taught her to care for, the hair that connected her to generations of black women who'd fought for the right to exist as themselves, scattered at her feet like evidence. Nia didn't cry. Tears would come later, in private, in her locked bathroom, with the shower running to cover the sound. But here? Now. She turned herself into stone. Her face stayed neutral. Her body stayed still. Only her eyes moved, tracking everything. Marcus's horrified expression. Brittany recording on her phone before quickly hiding it. David looked at his desk like he could disappear into it. And Mrs. Granger, breathing hard, scissors still in hand, finally stepping back to admire her work. "Now you look presentable," Mrs. Granger said, her voice almost gentle, almost maternal, as if she'd done Nia a favor, as if she'd corrected a mistake rather than committed assault. She set the scissors on her desk with a soft click. Let that be a lesson to all of you about following instructions the first time. The bell rang. The sound jerked everyone back to reality. Students grabbed their bags with unusual speed, desperate to escape the scene they'd just witnessed. They filed out in near silence, giving Nia a wide berth like she was contagious with trouble. Only Marcus paused at the door, making eye contact, mouthing, "You okay?" Nia gave the tiniest nod. He left. The classroom emptied. And Nia stood there, surrounded by pieces of herself on the floor, while Mrs. Granger began writing on the board as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just crossed the line so far over that there was no coming back. Nia bent down slowly. She picked up the largest clump of her cut hair. Her fingers closed around it. Then she walked to her backpack, pulled out a plastic sandwich bag, and carefully placed the hair inside. Evidence. Mrs. Granger noticed. "What do you think you're doing?" "Keeping what's mine," Nia said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. She sealed the bag, tucked it into her backpack's inner pocket, and walked toward the door. "We're not done here, Miss Robinson." "Yes, we are." Nia didn't turn around. "We're very done." She walked out of room 214 with her head up despite everything. Her scalp throbbed. Her butchered hair stuck out at uneven angles. Students in the hallway stared. Some whispered. One girl actually gasped. Nia walked past all of them, heading not to her next class, but to the main office. Her hands trembled now that no one was looking directly at her. But her resolve didn't, because Mrs. Evelyn Granger had made one critical error in judgment. She'd assumed Nia was powerless. She'd assumed that a black girl with natural hair was someone who could be humiliated without consequence. Have you ever had a teacher cross a line? Have you ever been targeted for just existing as yourself? Drop a comment and tell me your story, because what Nia does next is going to make you wish you'd done the same. She'd assumed wrong. What Mrs. Granger didn't know, what she couldn't have known because Nia Robinson kept her family life private, was that Nia wasn't just any student, but was knowledge of who Nia really was enough to undo what had already been done? Or was this about to become something much bigger than one teacher's cruelty? The main office smelled like copy machine toner and anxiety. Students only came here for 3 reasons. They were in trouble, they were sick, or something had gone very, very wrong. Nia walked past the attendance desk where Mrs. Chun looked up, saw her face, saw her hair, and immediately reached for the phone. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Mrs. Chun had worked at Jefferson High for 15 years. She'd seen fights, breakdowns, and every variety of teenage crisis. But the look on Nia Robinson's face made her hand shake as she dialed. "I need to speak to Principal Hawthorne," Nia said. Her voice carried a strange quality, too calm, too controlled, like a person in shock who hasn't processed it yet. "It's urgent." "He's in a meeting, but now, please." Mrs. Chun took one more look at Nia's butchered hair and made a decision. She stood up, walked to Principal Hawthorne's door, knocked once, and went inside without waiting for permission. 30 seconds later, the door opened. Principal James Hawthorne emerged, a tall black man in his 50s with graying temples and exhausted eyes of someone who'd been managing teenage chaos for 2 decades. He saw Nia and froze. "My office. Now." His voice carried an edge Nia had never heard before. She followed him inside. He closed the door, gestured to a chair, but Nia remained standing. "Tell me everything." So she did. She told him about the comment about her hair, about being yanked from her seat, about the grip on her scalp, the scissors, the hair falling. She recounted it like a court testimony, which in a way, it was no emotion, just facts, just sequence, just the truth. She pulled out her phone and showed him 3 photos she'd taken in the hallway bathroom, different angles of her butchered hair, the bald patch near her temple where Mrs. Granger had cut too close. Then she pulled out the plastic bag with her cut hair inside. "I kept this," she said, "in case it matters." Principal Hawthorne's jaw clenched so tight she could hear his teeth. "It matters." He picked up his desk phone. "Mrs. Chun, call Mrs. Robinson. Tell her it's an emergency and she needs to come to the school immediately. Then call District HR and tell them I need someone here within the hour." Then he paused, his eyes meeting Nia's, "Call the police non-emergency line and ask for an officer to come take statement." If this story is making your blood boil, hit that subscribe button, because the next part reveals exactly who Nia's family is and why Mrs. Granger just ended her career without even knowing it. Nia blinked. The police. What Mrs. Granger did is assault. Against a minor. On school property. In front of witnesses. His voice was steel. This isn't just a disciplinary issue anymore. This is criminal. Nia sat down then, the weight of it finally hitting. Assault. Criminal. Police. She'd come here expecting detention for Mrs. Granger, maybe a formal reprimand. She hadn't expected this. "I'm calling your mother now," Principal Hawthorne said, dialing. "And Nia? I am sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you in a place that's supposed to be safe." The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered, a voice that would soon be heard by many more people than just Principal Hawthorne. "This is Judge Catherine Robinson." Judge. That one word changed everything. Mrs. Granger had just assaulted the daughter of a county circuit court judge. But was that going to be justice or just revenge? And what happens when the full weight of the law turns its attention on one teacher who thought she was untouchable? Judge Catherine Robinson arrived at Jefferson High School exactly 23 minutes after receiving the call. She didn't speed. Judges don't break traffic laws, but she didn't waste a single second either. Her bailiff Marcus, not the student, different Marcus, had offered to drive her, but she declined. This was personal. This required the kind of control only a mother can summon when someone has hurt her child. She parked in the visitor lot, straightened her blazer, and walked through the front doors with the measured pace of someone who'd walked into courtrooms for 20 years. Mrs. Chun recognized her immediately. Judge Robinson had been to the school before, award ceremonies, parent-teacher conferences, the annual fundraiser. But she'd always come as a parent, warm and engaged. The woman walking toward the main office now was different. This was Judge Robinson, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Where is my daughter?" "Principal Hawthorne's office, Your Honor." The title slipped out automatically. "And the teacher?" "Still in her classroom. She doesn't know yet." Judge Robinson nodded once and walked past the desk. She knocked on the principal's door, professional courtesy, even now, and entered. Nia sat in the chair across from Principal Hawthorne's desk, her butchered hair even more shocking under the office's fluorescent lights. For just a moment, Judge Robinson stopped being a judge. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled. "Baby," she whispered. Then the judge reasserted herself. She crossed the room, knelt beside Nia's chair, and gently touched her daughter's face. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "No, Mom. Just my hair." Just her hair. As if that wasn't enough. As if 3 years of growth and care and identity hadn't just been hacked away by scissors and hatred. Judge Robinson stood, and when she turned to face Principal Hawthorne, her expression was carved from granite. "Walk me through what happened. Every detail, every witness, every word." He did. He showed her the photos, the bag of hair. He explained that he'd already called District HR and requested police presence. Judge Robinson listened without interrupting, her legal mind cataloging everything: evidence, witnesses, violations, charges. When he finished, she asked one question: "Where is security footage archived?" "We have cameras in hallways, but not in individual classrooms. So we have witnesses, but no video." 17 students saw it happen. And one of them, Brittany Chun, Mrs. Chen's niece, she got about 15 seconds on her phone before hiding it. Judge Robinson's eyebrow raised. "I need to see that footage. With parental permission, of course." What would you do if you had the power to bring real consequences? Would you use every tool at your disposal, or would you hold back? Tell me in the comments, because Nia and her mother are about to make a choice that will determine everything. Principal Hawthorne nodded. Mrs. Chun is already calling Brittany's parents. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chun opened it partway. "Your Honor, there's a police officer here. Officer Martinez. And the district HR director just arrived as well, Susan Winters." "Send them in," Judge Robinson said. Then she turned back to Nia. "Baby, you're going to have to tell this story again. Probably several times. Can you do that?" Nia nodded. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then let's make sure everyone hears it exactly right." The next hour became a procedural machine. Officer Martinez took Nia's statement, photographed her hair from multiple angles, and bagged the evidence Nia had collected. Susan Winters from District HR listened with an expression that grew darker with each detail. Principal Hawthorne provided the names of all 17 student witnesses. And Judge Robinson sat beside her daughter, saying little but missing nothing. She was building a case in her mind, not because she'd be trying it, but because she knew exactly what questions would be asked and what evidence would be needed. When Officer Martinez asked if Nia wanted to press charges, Judge Robinson let her daughter answer for herself. "Yes," Nia said without hesitation. "I want to press charges." Because this wasn't just about her anymore. How many other students had Mrs. Granger humiliated? How many had stayed silent because they thought no one would believe them? And what was happening right now in room 214, where Mrs. Granger was still teaching class, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse? Mrs. Evelyn Granger was teaching symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird when Principal Hawthorne and Susan Winters appeared at her classroom door. The irony would later be noted by several students, discussing a book about racial injustice moments before facing consequences for her own racist assault. She looked up from her lesson, irritated by the interruption. "Can this wait? We're in the middle of—" "Step into the hallway, please," Principal Hawthorne said. His tone left no room for negotiation. Mrs. Granger's face pinched. "My students will wait quietly." He looked at the class. Everyone read Chapter 7 silently. No talking. Mrs. Granger set down her book with exaggerated patience and followed them into the hallway. The door closed behind her. Through the window, students watched her confident posture slowly change as Principal Hawthorne spoke in low, urgent tones. Her face went from irritated to confused to pale. She said something sharp. Susan Winters responded, holding up a manila folder. Mrs. Granger's hand went to her throat. Principal Hawthorne gestured down the hallway. Mrs. Granger shook her head. He gestured again, firmer this time. The color drained entirely from her face. Inside the classroom, Marcus leaned toward the student next to him. "She's getting fired," he whispered. "Right now. She's getting fired." He was partially right. Mrs. Granger was being escorted to the main office, where she'd be placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. But it was bigger than firing. It was the beginning of a dismantling. In the main office, Mrs. Granger walked in expecting to defend herself against an overblown accusation. What she found was Judge Catherine Robinson sitting beside her daughter. The recognition hit like cold water. Mrs. Granger had seen Judge Robinson at school events. She'd made small talk with her at the fundraiser. She'd even complimented her earrings once. But she'd never connected the dots. Never realized that Nia Robinson was Judge Robinson's daughter. The realization showed on her face, a flicker of panic quickly masked by defensive anger. "This is a misunderstanding," Mrs. Granger said immediately. "I was enforcing school policy by cutting my daughter's hair." Judge Robinson's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "By putting your hands on a minor child? By using a racial slur in front of 17 witnesses?" I didn't." Mrs. Granger looked at Susan Winters at Principal Hawthorne, seeking allies. She found none. Students exaggerate. They misheard. I was trying to help her look professional. If you're watching this thinking Mrs. Granger might actually talk her way out of this, make sure you're subscribed, because the evidence that's about to be presented will leave absolutely no room for denial. "Professional," Judge Robinson repeated. "Tell me, Mrs. Granger, what exactly about my daughter's natural black hair is unprofessional?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Any answer would be an admission. Mrs. Granger's mouth opened, closed. The school policy states that hair must be neat and clean," Principal Hawthorne interrupted. "Nia's hair met both requirements. Your personal bias, however, did not meet professional standards." Susan Winters opened her manila folder. "Mrs. Granger, we've spoken to 6 students so far. Their accounts are consistent. You grabbed Nia Robinson by her hair, made a derogatory comment using the word nappy, and forcibly cut her hair with scissors. We also have 15 seconds of video footage that corroborates the assault." Mrs. Granger's face went from pale to gray. "Video. From a student's phone. It shows you holding scissors to Nia's hair and cutting it while she stands motionless. The audio is muffled, but we have witness testimony for the verbal component." Susan Winters closed the folder. "You're being placed on immediate administrative leave without pay pending a full investigation. You will surrender your keys, ID badge, and any school property. You are not to contact any students or staff regarding this incident. Do you understand?" "This is insane. I've taught here for 23 years, and in 23 years, you never thought to question why you found a black student's natural hair so offensive that you felt entitled to cut it off." Judge Robinson stood. She didn't raise her voice. "I didn't need to. You assaulted my daughter. In front of witnesses. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." But was the legal system really going to prosecute a teacher over hair? Or was something even bigger beginning to unfold, something that would reach far beyond one classroom and one terrible choice? The story leaked within hours. By the time school dismissed at 3:15 p.m., half of Jefferson High's student body had texted their parents. By dinner, it was on local news. By the next morning, it was national. "Teacher cuts black student's hair after calling it nappy," read one headline. "Judge's daughter assaulted by educator in shocking display of racism," declared another. The video, Brittany's 15 seconds of shaky phone footage, had been turned over to police as evidence, but someone had already made a copy. It went viral. 3 million views in 24 hours. The video was damning. You could see Mrs. Granger's hand gripping Nia's hair. You could see the scissors. You could see the exact moment the blades closed and hair fell. The audio was muffled but clear enough. "Sit your nappy-headed self down." The comments section exploded. Thousands of black women and girls shared their own stories, teachers who'd called their hair distracting, administrators who deemed their natural styles unprofessional, classmates who'd asked to touch it like they were petting an animal. This wasn't just about Nia anymore. This was about generations of policing black bodies, black hair, black existence. Nia stayed home from school that Thursday and Friday. Not because she was afraid, but because her mother insisted. "Let the investigation happen," Judge Robinson said. "Let the system work." But Nia knew her mother well enough to know she wasn't just waiting. She was strategizing. By Friday afternoon, Judge Robinson had done 3 things. First, she'd retained Matthew Chun, no relation to Mrs. Chun, one of the state's top civil rights attorneys. Second, she'd filed a formal Title VI complaint with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, alleging that Jefferson High had violated federal law prohibiting race-based discrimination. Third, she'd quietly reached out to 6 other families whose children had been in Mrs. Granger's class over the years. She'd found 3 students, all black girls, who reported similar incidents. One had been told her box braids were too urban for a school presentation. Another had been marked down on participation grades after refusing to straighten her hair for a class photo. A third had been sent home for wearing a head wrap, told it was gang-related. None had reported it officially. Why would they? They were kids going up against a teacher with 2 decades of tenure and glowing performance reviews. But now they had documentation. Now they had a pattern. Now they had someone willing to fight. Have you ever stayed silent about discrimination because you thought no one would believe you? Have you ever witnessed something wrong and done nothing because speaking up felt too dangerous? Comment below, because what these families are about to do will show you that silence isn't the only option. Matthew Chin filed a civil lawsuit Monday morning. Nia Robinson versus Evelyn Granger and Jefferson High School District, alleging assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. The complaint was 37 pages long. Included photos of Nia's hair before and after. Included the plastic bag of cut hair, now logged as evidence. Included witness statements from 17 students. Included testimony from the 3 other families about Mrs. Granger's pattern of discriminatory behavior. The requested damages were substantial, not because Judge Robinson needed money, but because money was the language school districts understood. Mrs. Granger hired a lawyer that same afternoon. Her attorney released a statement calling the situation a tragic misunderstanding blown out of proportion by media sensationalism. He claimed Mrs. Granger had been trying to help Nia fit in and had used poor judgment in a moment of frustration. He emphasized her spotless record and decades of service. The statement landed like a lead balloon. Poor judgment doesn't make you grab scissors. Trying to help doesn't make you use racial slurs. The public wasn't buying it, and more importantly, neither was the district attorney's office. On Wednesday, exactly 1 week after the incident, DA Rebecca Thornton announced that criminal charges were being filed. Evelyn Granger was charged with assault in the 3rd degree and endangering the welfare of a child. Both misdemeanors, but both carrying potential jail time. The arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. Mrs. Granger showed up in a conservative navy suit, her own hair pulled back severely, her face carefully composed. She pleaded not guilty. Her attorney requested a jury trial. The judge, not Catherine Robinson, who'd recused herself from anything related to the case, set bail at $5,000 and ordered Mrs. Granger to have no contact with Nia or any current Jefferson High students. She posted bail within an hour. But could a criminal conviction really change anything? Or would this become just another story people shared online before moving on to the next outrage? What happened next would determine whether this was just about one teacher's punishment or about something that could actually protect the next Nia Robinson. Nia returned to Jefferson High 3 weeks after the incident. Her mother had offered to transfer her to any school she wanted, private school, a different district, even homeschooling. But Nia refused. "If I leave, she wins," Nia said. "She gets to cut my hair and then cut me out of my own school? No." So she came back. Her hair had been carefully shaped by a professional stylist into a short, beautiful natural cut that framed her face. It looked intentional now, not butchered. But Nia would never forget what had been taken without permission. The school felt different. Students stared, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with respect. Teachers were overly careful around her, like she was made of glass or litigation. Mrs. Granger's classroom remained empty, a substitute rotating through until the district could find a permanent replacement. And Nia? Nia walked those hallways with her head higher than ever, because she'd learned something powerful. She'd learned that silence protects predators and speaking up protects everyone who comes after you. The criminal trial happened in May. It lasted 3 days. The prosecution called 17 student witnesses. Every single one testified that they'd seen Mrs. Granger grab Nia's hair and cut it. Every single one confirmed the racial slur. Brittany's video played on a courtroom screen, 15 seconds that felt like 15 minutes. Nia testified calmly, recounting every detail exactly as she had that first day in Principal Hawthorne's office. She had practice now. She'd told this story to police, to lawyers, to journalists, to her therapist. Each telling was easier and harder at the same time. Mrs. Granger's defense was weak. Her attorney argued that she'd been enforcing school policy in good faith and that the situation had escalated due to Nia's defiance. He called character witnesses, former students who said Mrs. Granger had been kind to them, colleagues who praised her dedication. But none of that erased the video. None of that explained away the scissors or the slur or the 17 witnesses. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Mrs. Granger guilty on both counts. At sentencing, the judge gave her 60 days in county jail, suspended to probation, 300 hours of community service, mandatory racial bias training, and a permanent mark on her teaching record. She would never teach again. Her license was revoked by the State Board of Education. 23 years of career ended because she couldn't see a black girl's hair as anything other than something that needed to be controlled. If this kind of justice restoration story speaks to you, subscribe so you don't miss stories like this, because the impact of Nia's case goes even further than one courtroom. But the bigger victory came 6 months later. The civil lawsuit settled out of court. Jefferson High School District agreed to pay Nia Robinson $450,000, money that Judge Robinson immediately placed in a trust for Nia's college education. But the money wasn't the point. The settlement also required the district to implement comprehensive policy changes. Every school in the district would receive mandatory training on racial bias and discrimination. The dress code was rewritten to explicitly protect natural and protective hairstyles. A new reporting system was created for students to report discrimination confidentially. And every teacher would undergo annual civil rights education. Nia's case did something else, too. It added momentum to legislation that had been stalled in the state capitol. The Crown Act, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, had been introduced twice before and failed to pass. But after Nia's story went national, lawmakers felt pressure. The bill passed with bipartisan support 7 months after Mrs. Granger cut Nia's hair. It became illegal in their state to discriminate based on hair texture or protective hairstyles in schools and workplaces. Nia was invited to the signing ceremony. She stood behind the governor as he signed the bill into law, her natural hair shaped into beautiful coils that caught the camera flashes. This was power. This was changed. This was justice that protected not just her, but every black girl who came after. But was this really a happy ending? Had one girl's suffering actually created lasting change? Or would people forget the moment the news cycle moved on? And what about Nia herself? How do you move forward when your trauma becomes a hashtag? 2 years later, Nia Robinson graduated from Jefferson High as valedictorian. She stood at the podium in front of 300 students, their families, and a faculty that looked very different from the one she'd started with. Principal Hawthorne sat in the front row. Mrs. Chun dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Marcus, who'd become one of Nia's closest friends after that day in Mrs. Granger's classroom, gave her a thumbs up from his seat. And in the audience, wearing a proud smile, sat Judge Catherine Robinson. Nia's speech wasn't about Mrs. Granger. It wasn't about trauma or victimhood or even justice. It was about resilience. "I learned something important at this school," Nia said, her voice carrying across the auditorium. "I learned that your silence is exactly what people who harm you are counting on. They're counting on you to be too afraid, too tired, too alone to fight back. And I learned that when you refuse to be silent, when you stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone who'll face the same fight, you stop being a victim and become a force." She talked about the 3 other girls who'd come forward. She talked about the policy changes. She talked about the Crown Act. None of that happens if I go home that day and just cry in my room. None of that happens if I decide one teacher isn't worth the fight. But it also doesn't happen alone. It happened because my mom believed me. Because Principal Hawthorne acted immediately. Because 17 classmates told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Because Brittany was brave enough to hit record. Change isn't one person. It's a community deciding that enough is enough. The applause started before she finished. It grew until the entire auditorium was standing, students, parents, teachers, everyone. Nia stood at that podium, in her graduation gown, with her natural hair styled in elaborate updo, and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Not vindication. Not even pride. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you didn't let someone break you. The kind that comes from turning pain into purpose. Have you ever turned something painful into something powerful? Have you ever watched someone's cruelty backfire in the most poetic way? Tell me in the comments what this story means to you, because Nia's journey didn't end at graduation. She went to college on a full scholarship, partly funded by her settlement trust, partly funded by merit. She majored in civil rights law, because of course she did. Nia Robinson had discovered something about herself in that classroom when the scissors came out. She discovered that she was someone who documented injustice, who stood firm, who refused to let cruelty have the last word. That's not a victim. That's a future attorney. Maybe even a future judge, like her mother. Mrs. Granger served her probation without incident. She moved to a different state, far from a school district where she'd taught for 2 decades. She never taught again. Her name became a cautionary tale in education programs, what happens when implicit bias becomes explicit violence. Some people felt sorry for her. Most didn't. She'd had 23 years to examine her prejudices, to question why a black girl's hair bothered her so much, to be better. She'd chosen not to. The consequences were hers to carry. But the 3 other girls who'd come forward? They graduated too. They went to college. They wore their hair however they wanted, braids, locks, afros, twists, without fear. Because Nia had fought a battle that protected them retroactively and protected countless others going forward. That's legacy. That's the impact. That's the difference between suffering in silence and speaking truth to power. The Crown Act continued to spread. More states adopted it. Workplaces changed their policies. Slowly, painfully, the culture shifted. It wasn't perfect. Discrimination didn't end, but got harder to get away with. And every time a black girl stood up to a teacher or employer who tried to police her hair, she had legal protection that Nia helped create. Does that erase what happened to Nia? No, but it means it wasn't for nothing. And sometimes that's the only justice trauma can offer, not erasure, but meaning. 5 years after the incident, Nia Robinson sat in a law school classroom at Georgetown University. She was 23 now. In her 2nd year, already interning with the ACLU's Racial Justice Program. Her professor was discussing a case, a recent lawsuit in California, where a black student had been suspended for wearing braids to school. The school district had lost. The student had won. And the legal precedent cited in the ruling included Nia's case, Robinson versus Granger. Nia stared at her textbook. Her case. Her name. Her trauma had become case law. It was surreal and validating and a little bit painful all at once. After class, her professor asked her to stay. "I know that's your case," Professor Williams said quietly. She was a black woman in her 50s with natural hair going gray at the temples. "I wanted you to know that I teach it every year. Not just the legal components, but what it represents. You were 16 years old, and you did something most adults can't do. You stood up." Nia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "How are you doing with it? Really doing?" Professor Williams asked. It was the first time in years someone had asked that question and actually waited for a real answer. "Some days I'm fine," Nia said slowly. "I'm proud of what we accomplished. But some days I'm just angry that I had to fight it all. That a teacher could look at me and see something that needed to be fixed instead of a student who deserved respect." "That anger is valid," Professor Williams said. "Don't let anyone tell you it's not. But also don't let it consume you. You're going to be an incredible attorney. The world needs what you're building from that pain." Nia graduated from Georgetown Law 3 years later. She passed the bar on her first attempt. She joined a civil rights law firm in D.C., specializing in education discrimination cases. And on her first day, sitting on her new desk, was a framed photo. It was from the day the Crown Act was signed. Nia, at 17, standing behind the governor, her hair a crown of coils, her expression fierce and hopeful. Her mother had given it to her. "So you remember why you're doing this," Judge Robinson had said. Nia kept that photo on every desk for the rest of her career. She won cases. She lost cases. She fought school districts and employers and systems that moved slower than justice demanded. And every time she represented a client who'd been targeted for their hair, for their skin, for their existence, she thought about that day in room 214. She thought about the scissors and the slur and the choice she'd made not to stay silent. If you made it to the end of this story, do me a favor. Share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that speaking up matters. Share it with a young person who thinks they're powerless. Share it with anyone who's ever been told to change themselves to make others comfortable. Because this isn't just Nia's story. It's the story of every person who decided their dignity wasn't negotiable. Mrs. Granger never apologized. Not publicly. Not privately. Nia didn't need her to. The apology she needed came in the form of policy changes and legal protections and a law degree that gave her the power to fight for others. Some people said Nia's response was too harsh. That Mrs. Granger's life was ruined over one mistake. But here's the thing about one mistake, it's never really one. It's the culmination of years of unchecked bias, of small cruelties that went unreported, of a system that protected teachers over students. Nia didn't ruin Mrs. Granger's life. Mrs. Granger did that herself the moment she picked up those scissors. And Nia? Nia Robinson became exactly what Mrs. Granger feared that day in the classroom. She became powerful. She became unignorable. She became someone who changed the rules so that what happened to her would be harder to do to anyone else. That's not revenge. That's transformation. That's taking the worst moment of your life and asking, what can I build from this rubble? The answer was everything. Justice, law, protection, legacy, and a reminder that sometimes the people who try to cut you down end up giving you the fuel to rise higher than they ever imagined. The scissors that were meant to humiliate became the catalyst for change. And the girl who was supposed to sit down and shut up, she stood up and spoke loud enough that the whole country had to listen. That's the story of Nia Robinson. That's the story of what happens when cruelty meets courage and loses.